Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sayers, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I might take up my full 5 minutes here, so make sure you give me that bell. And I'll probably have a bit more focus on the rates, the cuts and the shares and my feedback to you now. It's important to listen to the voice of Aucklanders and to listen to the feedback that they've bothered to take the time to give us. Of 41,146 responses the Council has received as feedback from the public in the consultation process. It's the largest in our history as a super city. Over 53% of Aucklanders supported this, either the full sale of the shares or the partial sale of the shares. In my ward, for example, over 66% of the residents and ratepayers supported selling all of the shares or partially selling the shares. I am wholeheartedly in support of keeping the residential rate increase at below the rate of inflation. This is because Auckland is in a cost of living crisis and we need to avoid dipping further into ratepayers' pockets. Equally, I'm keen not to further increase the massive amount of Auckland Council debt. This is because debt attracts interest repayment costs, which also hits Aucklanders in the pocket. Finding a balanced budget which addresses the $325 million deficit requires a balance of unpopular levers available to the Council to be used. No one wants to cut services nor higher rates bills in this cost of living crisis, which is hurting households when they can least afford it. This ranges from the ability to pay for the groceries, put fuel in the car, put shoes on children's feet, or pay the rent, amongst many other affordability issues ordinary citizens of Auckland are facing. The Mayor, to his credit, has listened to the feedback from Aucklanders and the local boards and restored funding to a number of service cuts he originally proposed. This includes refunding the Citizen Advisory Bureau and the local boards so they can continue to support the communities. Aucklanders are looking for the Mayor to fix Auckland. They also want the Mayor to stop unnecessary or non-cost-effective spending. However, the Mayor has inherited a massive $325 million budget hole, which was the result of the financial decisions made by the Finance and Performance Committees and the governing body decisions in previous terms. In my opinion, this is a band-aid budget to stop the financial hemorrhaging of the Council. The Mayor must present his promised Fix Auckland budget, which he has signalled he wants to do. He has signalled he wants to do that, and he is intended to do that as part of the 10-year budget setting process next year. I support selling 18.09% of the shareholdings in the Auckland Airport to pay down debt of $2.2 billion, realising $100 million per annum of ongoing interest cost savings. This does involve foregoing estimated dividends of $40 million this year, but also realises a net benefit every year of at least $60 million a year. So stop spending $100 million a year in interest costs to get back $40 million a year in dividends. The rising cost of living, increasing rents and mortgage rates, fuel costs, increased food costs, are all placing households under significant pressure. This means Auckland Council has to have the courage to make significant cut costs, avoid increasing debt, and avoid dipping further into ratepayers' pockets by unnecessarily increasing rates. Large-scale cuts to Auckland's bloated bureaucracy is required that are not core council business or necessary frontline services. If we repeat using the budget levers, especially taking on more debt, in the same way we have under the past Len Brown and Gough administrations, we will simply be repeating history. Now is the time for bold and brave decisions to stop the wastage and overspending get council back to core business, to get control over the council-controlled organisations. Auckland also needs reassurance in what you plan to put up to the vote today, that the selling of the airport shares will not be wasted by funding unnecessary council spending. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Right on the 5 minutes. Councillor Hills, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. I guess when I look at this budget, I don't like any of the levers. And I think most of us would probably say that. And most of what I hear from the public is that they don't like any of the levers. The focus for me, the lever that I've been wanting to change the most, has been the cuts. From the beginning, you've heard me, Mayor, around this table, in your office, on the phone to you, month after month. The focus for me was reducing those cuts to our community, reducing the staff cuts, reducing the what I feel is mean cuts to what is going on in this city, the environment, to climate, to events, to culture, to libraries, to local board, to economic development, to, I could go and keep going. You know, the cuts in the budget presented were rough. What the community told us, and I've never seen it happen before, is 73% of those who submitted told us they also oppose all or some of those cuts. That is the strongest I've seen on almost any question we've ever put to the public, and we had 4 times the normal amount of people tell us that. So that gave me heart that you would listen, the council would listen, but also I was on the right track with my thinking. What wasn't clear after that was what Aucklanders wanted us to do to fill that gap or to reduce those cuts and fix it. So all local boards, apart from Waiheke, majority said either all or part of the airport shares. Rates and debt, there was far less certainty around what people wanted us to do. There was not a steer clear across the city on that. And then on the storm response, that was almost as good as the opposing the cuts. I think it was 69 or 68%, which said we need to do something about the storm. I guess my understanding of where we are as a council, as a group, I will admit this has been the hardest 6 months of my career, I guess, and it hasn't been nice, and it hasn't just been about things you've said, Mayor. There's been a lot of other discussions around this table that I've been appalled at around staff, each other, things like that. So it isn't a nice place at the moment, and I think the city knows that and can see that. So, and I've given you that feedback too, Mayor. But this isn't about you or us, it's about the city, the community, and the staff jobs we're putting online. So even with the cuts proposed, you know, I put forward to you about 60 million of my hopes and dreams of what would come back. Even the cuts proposed still leave us with hundreds of jobs being cut from this organisation. And it also still means tough times for our city when they'll be paying more but getting less. That is what's going to happen here. So I guess I pleaded to our colleagues, and I know Councillor Ferry did the same. If we weren't going to sell any shares at all, then it should be on rates, because that gives us the same impact over 10 years. You know, cuts is something that I wanted to rule out. Cuts will give you the same impact. If you cut 20 million, that 20 million is cut for 10 years. If you raise 20 million from a 1% rate rise, that sits on your books for 10 years. And same with the sale of the shares. That, I mean, it gets lumpy towards the end of the 10-year budget, but in these early years, it was quite a big saving. The only thing that doesn't do that is the debt. And so I know you've moved on debt. I know Councillor Simpson has moved on debt. What you've got here is higher than what I thought you would go. But if you are leaning too hard, we are taking our communities and our staff through this pain again next year. And I'll ask some questions about what that looks like. But if you go too hard on the debt, and do not get confused, the Bernard Hickeys and others, do not get confused. I support debt for new assets. We have done that, and maybe Morris and others don't understand why we did that, but we dramatically increased, more than doubled our capital build in 6 years, and we did that a lot with debt. But that is those long-term assets, roads and pipes and things that are important to us that make sense to borrow for. My opinion, we can't do is keep borrowing for operational costs, because we only add it. It only gives us that 1 year sugar hit, and we're back to figuring out that hole again. So I guess what I'm saying is we need to work together. You know, I've been on the losing side of a few votes, like on discretionary spending and things, which I thought was a mean vote. I want to work with the majority here around this council, because we will break our staff and our city if we make them do this again next year. And I think we just need to be really clear about that we will do that again if it's all on debt, or if we don't make a hard decision today and just leave it to the LTP. I don't want to do that to our city or our staff.
Thank you very much. Right on 5 minutes. Councillor Watson, please.
Just a progress report, everyone. We're nearly half there. There's only 12 to go. Like some of the others, Mr Mayor, I'm just going to make a few general observations and leave some of the detail to later on, where I think that's more appropriately addressed. I guess I'd just say at the outset, in terms of process, I believe quite strongly that the big item, the airport shares, that should definitely be addressed as part of the long-term plan process. It should be the last resort, not the first resort, as has been the case through this annual plan, and should occur after a full and thorough examination of the council's finances, which again has not happened thus far. It's becoming pretty apparent there is a fundamental restructuring of the council that is required, and that will be hard. I don't think anyone's saying otherwise. We will have to endeavour to cut costs while trying to retain important services, and we need to address that, and address that expeditiously over this forthcoming year. As far as selling the shares go, to me that's really just the easy option at the moment, and my real concern is that actually doing that will work against that fundamental restructuring that needs to occur. There have been lots of talks of sugar hits. Well, that'll be a $2.4 billion sugar hit in my humble opinion. What I feel has been lacking from this process, which I appreciate more time for, is more of an investment perspective. We used to have that through Auckland Council Investments Limited, where we had experts, we had people who invested large sums of money, who did provide an investment view, and actually did produce very good returns for us. That went, unfortunately, and I think, you know, without being unkind, a closer analysis of what that shareholding means to the council in terms of returns, essentially $2.4 billion over just a 7-year period, has been glossed over. If it wasn't retaining the airport shares, you wouldn't be in the position now to to sell off $2 billion worth of them. They'd be long since gone. So we definitely need an investment perspective rather than the rather limited view we've had thus far. As far as the interim goes, we have to land a budget, and it has to be a balanced budget. I'm hopeful that can be provided, and through a prudent increase in the use of debt. It's a little rich to be talking about the shutters coming down the debt when we're sitting at 12 billion in debt. It might have been nice if that had been signalled a little earlier on in the piece than 2023, but there you go, that's the position we're in. I agree with the signalling of the Mayor to keep the rates in light of the pressures people on in or around the cost of inflation, and I think that can be done. I think the exact numbers are probably better addressed later on, but for me, I'm basically signalling that the use of that additional debt is the mechanism by which that can be achieved, and hopefully the inclusion of an airport dividend might be helpful too in the calculations. Finally, Mr Mayor, I would say that you know, if we're giving our honest feedback here, I've found the sell the shares or face cuts to the community and higher rates both a little distasteful and misleading, and actually hasn't helped matters in terms of that need to come up with that balanced interim budget. So you're certainly not responsible for the position we're in. I don't see us in a crisis. I think with the use of the time that's available, that balanced interim budget can be produced. It doesn't require the sale of the airport shares, either full or partial, and I think it buys us time to make that fundamental restructuring that now must occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Walker, please.
I'll just follow on from John. I won't repeat everything that John said, but I agree with everything that he said. And one of the huge concerns I've had is around contestable advice. Now, having said that, myself and a number of councillors had the opportunity to hear from the person that led out our diversified assets funds, John Crawford, one of the most competent financial advisors in New Zealand, Commerce Commission, Treasury. Maurice Williamson knows him well and could extol all of his experience. I won't. And he said it like this. Let's say you've got a family and mum and dad, they've got some assets. They've got some children. The children have got difficulties with their mortgages, and they come to mum and dad and say, look, sell down some of the family's assets, help us to pay off our mortgages. And mum and dad look at the circumstance and they assess. But the lifestyle of the children was somewhat extravagant. They were living beyond their means. They had some fast cars, overseas trips and the like. And the parents knew that if they sold off some of the family silver, they would not be solving the problem. In fact, they could even be making the problem worse. And John Crawford said that we're a bit like that. We're not addressing the underlying financial issues, and that is that we are spending beyond our means. We're spending beyond our means, and we've been doing it for successive years, and that has to stop. And fortunately, we've got a mayor, and that's yourself, that has a commitment to turning that around, and that I applaud, because we need to do that. And I would say that making cuts does not have to involve cuts in services, does not correlate with cuts in services. We can do better and we can be more efficient, and there are any number of us around this table, including Councillor Turner and many members of the public and competent people, that will tell us that, and will tell us in some detail where those cuts can be made and that they do not involve cuts in services. Maurice Williamson has had access to granular financials. We have not had adequate opportunity as a council to actually go over the council's finances and find those savings. We have not had that, and that is particularly disappointing, but we will have that opportunity in the long-term plan. And I would suggest that it is in the long-term plan that is the most appropriate time to deal with the airport shares. And I agree with the sentiments expressed about the return that the airport shares have given us. And one of the things that we might do as part of that long-term plan, which is a suggestion that Mr. Crawford made, is we might roll it into a rainy day fund. That might involve selling airport shares and putting some of that money into even better investments, bearing in mind that the airport was returning up to 18% in some years. And if those investments are returning far more than our cost of capital, and our interest costs are going to be tracking down, then as a city, we are in a far more sustainable, credible, affordable, and implementable circumstance, to quote Mr. Gudsell, than what we are now. And that is what we should be considering in the long-term plan. And my particular concern in this budget is, in my view, we've been somewhat railroaded in respect to what we've gone out with. So we have not considered adequately the number of savings we could have found. We have not considered adequately circumstances we might have changed around depreciation. The officers tell us those things are locked in. We do know that we can enhance our position going forward with better development contributions, with value uplift, with more support in the form of government assistance, all of those things. And if you look at our March investor update, what it does show in terms of our debt to revenue is it starts tracking down dramatically over time, quite significantly. The line is there. So we're in the very fortunate position where this council is rock solid, Auckland Airport is rock solid, we've got a great investment in a port that's solid. So we have a very, very good situation to go forward and not have to make decisions immediately in this long-term plan that may be counterproductive. And in terms of suggestion, there is a paper that you and other councillors have that has been put together by a number of councillors. Tufuli has distributed it. That does show a way forward in terms of a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have Councillor Williamson, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm reminded of the American tourist driving around Ireland and asking an old Irishman, can you tell me how to get to Limerick? And the response was, well, I wouldn't start from here. And that's our problem. I wish we wouldn't have to start from here either, but we bloody well do. And I'm really sorry that we have to do it in the reverse order, because I think the long-term plan changes are where the real significant root and branch changes need to be made. This place has for a long time put its rates up above the rate of inflation. It doesn't look much in any one year, but if you look at the cumulative over it, it's been horrific for the poor old ratepayer. And right now, there are people on fixed income struggling to put food on the table. So my priority for things is to make sure that we keep the rates within the rate of inflation or near as possible. My other concern is that we've got those 4 circles up there. I'm thinking I haven't done this before, I only drew them just then, so hopefully they'll work. But the 4 circles of expenditure reductions, increased debt, the airport share sales, and finally what happens to our rate circle. And using my old mathematics training that John Crawford and I went through together at university, hopefully you realise that they come together in only one place, and it's called the solution space in there. And the solution space is something I've hardly heard anyone talk about. I know so many of you around this table that say, well, I support cutting this, but I don't think we should do this and we don't do that. When you add those numbers up, they're not within the solution space. They all have to overlap. The reductions have to be equivalent to the debt we take on, equivalent to what the change of the airport share sales are, and that we keep our rates within it. And that calculator, I hope, helped you at least start to focus on that. I want to address a couple of things that are just wrong. I heard somebody here today say, oh, the public don't support airport share sales. But I can tell you, yes, they do. From the polling that we did for Auckland airport shares, from the submissions 53%, and from the survey 76% were supportive of some form of airport share sales. So that's wrong to say the public don't. They did. They didn't support a whole of the airport share sales, but they did support the concept of selling them. I also keep hearing that it's a strategic asset, and I simply don't know what that means. It's a strategic asset for the city. It's a strategic asset for the country, but it's not a strategic asset for this council in terms of an investment, because it costs us more every year than it pays us. Now people say, oh, no, they're free, we got gifted them. I'm sorry, when the bank puts a mortgage on your house, it doesn't say that only applies to the bathroom and the back toilet. It applies to the property overall, and our debt, our 11.7 going to 12, applies to everything. And selling those shares would take 2.3 billion off that debt and drop our interest rate costs for about 100, and it's slightly more, and we'll get more as some of our debt comes off hedge fund. And those of you who have been saying to me, oh, but we think interest rates are going to go down, good luck with that. Because interest rates, I think, are going to be held in, and so is inflation, quite strongly in the upper direction for at least the next few years. And so I'm very much in favour of selling any asset that is costing us more to keep than it's returning to us. And even, there's a good old Tremolo song, even the bad times are good. Well, even the good times are bad with these shares. Even when you get to the very best return we can get from all the analysts saying it, you have to have interest rates at under 2% for you to actually be washing a face on these shares. So I most certainly will be voting for it. I'm sure I'm going to be in the minority. And lastly, I want to say something about ratio of debt to assets. I hear so many people, I heard 2 local board chairmen this morning on the radio saying, well, we've got 70 billion of assets. Well, let me tell you, the vast bulk of those are parks and recreational facilities and roads and pipes and dams and so on. You can't sell those. You can't realise those assets. Most companies, when they portray what their asset base is, they're buildings, they're vehicles, they're a whole lot of tangible assets you can sell if you're in trouble. Most of our assets are unrealisable. So this idea of, well, we've only got 12 billion of debt, but we've got 70 billion of assets is just so wrong. And finally, a warning to you. There's so much more coming down the pipe at us. The CRL, God knows what's coming in that. I've been told that the final figure is going to be 7.25 when it's finally washed up and when we get all of the stations. We're going to have to borrow debt to fund that. And that debt ratio is already near the ceiling. So please look at trying to bring that back down. For those 2 people from the West who have got a lot of properties that are going to need remediation and actually being bought out of, we're going to have to take on a big more chunk of debt to do those. Those are things we have to do. And we do not need to own an asset that is not washing its face. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. It's been really interesting listening to everybody's comments, and I'm still listening. And right to the very end, I think I'll be still listening. But I don't think anybody in this room actually campaigned on selling any of the airport shares. I campaigned on reducing operational costs. By doing that, I believe we can achieve a lot more, and especially in savings with a long-term plan. And I think we're really lucky to have somebody like Councillor Williamson, who's the chair of expenditure and procurement, because I know he's really doing a lot of the hard, heavy lifting and trying to find some really good savings. And around this table, I've been around this table for a number of years, and I haven't heard very many people around this table want to make any savings. Every time we want to try and save something, no, we can't do that, we can't do that. Well, I tell you what, there's people in our communities at the moment that if the rates go up anymore, it's tipping them over the edge. And we're talking about people that are on fixed incomes, we're talking about young families that have just purchased, have got a huge mortgage. Not only the huge mortgage, but they're also having to pay rates. They're trying to put food on the table. They're just trying to live. And I think I'm listening, and I'm truly, it's going to be right at the very end, after I've listened to everybody and we get back into the debate, that I will finally decide how I'm going to vote. You know, there's been some really good arguments on all sides, and so anyway, I'm going to be interested in hearing from everybody else, but one of the things I think we really do need to look at this long-term plan. That's where we're going to make the real savings, and we all have to really decide that we're going to make those savings. We can't just do everything. We're doing so much. We're picking up a lot of what central government should be doing, a lot of the social and the education and the health things we shouldn't be so involved in. I know, yes, they give us a bit of funding and everything, but we shouldn't be getting involved in all of that. That's not what the rates are all about. So anyway, I think I've said enough, and I'll look forward to hearing from everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the issues we face here today, particularly in relationship to the proposed sale of Auckland International Airport shares, can be covered by 3 categories, if you like. And I'm going to focus on the airport shares because I'll tell you now, essentially, the Mayor's proposal, as significantly amended, is by and large acceptable to me, including the rates. So I want to talk about the airport share proposal, which is not acceptable to me, and I believe most Aucklanders. And I want to talk about the mandate because I don't believe anyone, and I think Councillor Stewart made the point, anyone in the room has a mandate, a political mandate, as relatively recently elected councillors and mayor to sell the airport shares. No one campaigned on selling assets, and obviously as successful politicians, why would you? Because selling assets is well known to be the kiss of death, and no one wants to go there. So in terms of the mandate, the mayor has a mandate to fix Auckland, and I support that mandate. I would contend selling our major income earning asset, or one of them, one of the two last ones, is not the way to fix Auckland. The long-term plan and looking at all the aspects and analysing our problematic finances is the way to do that. In terms of mandate, 34% of the Aucklanders who were asked said no sale. 26 said, in effect, if you have to, if there's a crisis, you can sell some. And 24% said you can sell the lot. Now, I reject completely the logic that adds 26 to 24 and say that's the majority. If that relates to elections, it would be the runners-up. The Electoral Commission would say candidate B and candidate C got more votes than candidate A, therefore candidate A is out. Well, that's just not on, is it? In terms of the local boards, whose opinion we value very much because of their closeness to the community, 12 out of 21 said don't sell. And I'll tell you, I'm impressed with that because local boards were facing severe cuts, and yet, rather than coughing up or backing down or buckling, they kept to their principles because they knew full well that the people that they're close to didn't want the airport shares sold. And then I come to the matter of financial prudence. Councillor Williamson's talked about our assets. This is a real asset, folks. This is an earning asset, just like the ports of Auckland. It's absolute security in terms of our income to, debt to revenue ratio. Not only does it earn us money, but it earns us capital gains on our balance sheet. Any decent accountant will tell you that. And so in terms of financial prudence, the public will know, the older ones in particular, that selling the BNZ, selling the Auckland Savings Bank, selling Telecom, selling the power companies was not a smart move at all financially long term. Selling Air New Zealand and selling New Zealand Rail was even worse because the government had to step in and buy the thing back because it was so badly managed. They were so badly managed. So asset sales is not financial prudence. And that there's one last point, I've already touched on it. This is a big deal, $2.35 billion. It's the biggest asset sale in Auckland's history. And how unfortunate it is that we are faced with this. The legal aspects of this process are going to be closely examined. I feel that the council has got into the habit in terms of consultation, and I'll mention Auckland Transport as well, of taking consultation for granted. The way the council and AT went about consultation, I found in the election campaign, caused more aggro with the community than even rates increases. So I would make the plea, Mr Mayor, yes, fix Auckland and let us help you, but do it the proper way. This is a long-term decision we're facing here, and with the other long-term decisions, it should be dealt with in what the local government calls the long-term plan. Thank you.